Welcome to the Northeast Kingdom Voice. I'm your host, Scott Wheeler. Today's guest is Mr. Basketball, Gene Tessier. He is also a Vietnam veteran. He's here today to talk a bit about his life, whether it be his time in Vietnam or his years as the head of the Border Hoop Basketball League. Welcome to the show, Gene.
Thank you for having me.
We're also here, we're going to talk a little bit about your Vietnam reunions you've been going to in recent years. But, well, let's back up a little bit. Who is Gene Tessier? Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Evansville, Vermont, the town of Brownington.
Right. Now, my wife tells me that your family had a store.
Yes,
there.
it did. Yep.
Now, what was that called?
That was called Tessier's Country Store.
Right. Yeah. No, she was telling me. We drove by back a few days ago, and she showed me where your store used to be.
Yes.
So, so you graduated. Were you pre-Lake Region, or did you graduate?
No, I didn't graduate from high school. I knew more than the teachers did.
How was that? Yeah.
So I got done then, but I did graduate in 1995, I think it was, at North Country High School.
Right. So along comes Vietnam. That changed your life a little bit. What happened there? Were you drafted?
Yeah, I was drafted. I was drafted like in May. I left in May of
what year?
1968.
Now, 1968 was a big year for the draft, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. Yeah. That's a year, Martin Luther King and all them, happened.
Now, was there any way because you were also a farm boy, weren't you?
Yep.
Now, was there any way that you could have gotten out of it?
Yes, I think I could have, but I didn't. I thought it was my duty to go. I kind of remember what Mr. Kennedy, the President Kennedy said, ask not what you can do for your country. Ask not what your country can do for you, what you can do for your country.
Right.
And I felt that I had to do that.
Right. So you grew up on the farm in Evansville, son of storekeepers. Was it a real culture shock going to Vietnam?
Yeah, it sure was. The heat, the people, and I don't think they really wanted us there.
Who were you with?
I was with the first of the 27 Wolfhound, 25th Division.
Right. And what was your role?
My role was, I did tunnel rats and, walk points or whatever, they gave me.
Yeah, you were telling me in a previous interview that although you weren't an official tunnel rat, they kind of looked at you because you were small.
Yes,
and
yes.
They'd say, "Hey, down there." So,
yeah.
What was it like going into the tunnels?
It was, when you're young, they picked you and you say, "Oh, I can do this," and it's hard to explain because you get going. Sometimes the tunnels got smaller as you kept going, and the thing that used to really frighten me is when I had to turn around. Sometimes I get wedged in and had to take my bayonet and kind of to get out. But once I get out, the boys would pick on me and said, "Good thing you were small, Shorty, or we would have left you in there."
So, because how tall were you and how much did you weigh back then?
I'm about the same height as I was, and I maybe weighed about 115, 118 pounds.
Right. And how tall are you then?
I think I was maybe 5'3".
Yeah, so I could see how they would say, okay, instead of having this big guy.
Yes.
Did you ever run into anything down here?
Yeah, I ran into, a lot of them was, bodies and stuff. Ran into one time. I ran into one, and I don't think he was more than 13 years old. And he looked to me, I looked to him, and he went one way and I went the other.
Right. Now, was it you who, did you find like a hospital?
Yeah.
You're the one who found the hospital?
Yeah. Well, Went in maybe about 30, 40 feet. Then all at once you dropped and a big room appeared, and maybe as big as this room here, and had all kinds of medical supply, but nobody was in there. It was, you know, and they took and we kept an eye on it all night with flares in the air, and somehow they went in there and they took everything out that night.
Right out from underneath you.
Yeah, we never saw it.
Now, what part of the country was this?
This was along the Coochie, Daltang area.
Right. Did you serve with anybody from this area, or did you ever?
Yes, I went when I first got there in October of '68. They asked me where I was from. I told them I was from Vermont, and the guy said, "What state is that from?"
Yeah.
And they said, "You know, we got another guy here from Vermont."
Right.
So I went in, and turned out to be it was Kermit Schultz. I never knew him. He lived in Newport Center, and we got acquainted. And when he came back from Vietnam, he built my house for me. And then he moved to California.
Oh, that's right. You still stay in contact with him,
Yes,
don't
we
you?
do. Yep.
How long were you out in the bush at a time?
Oh, it varied. It depended on the operation. Sometimes 30 to 40 days,
Right.
and sometimes less. You know, it all depended what the operation was.
Right.
And then we had a base camp you would go back to at night.
Right.
You know.
I know one fella, I believe it was me that introduced you to him, John Wilson.
Yep.
John's been on the show, and I've written about him, and he was saying it. You know, it was he was saying that when people think of combat in Vietnam, they think of people shooting at you. But he was saying the booby traps and
Yes.
such. He said those were those were just, you know, kept you on edge.
Yeah, they did, because every time you walk point, you know, you thought of that. You had to be aware at all times where you were going.
Right. Did you ever have any near misses?
Oh, yeah. I got behind a little tree once about 4 inches, and they didn't hit me. I got this. I squeezed up as much as I could behind it.
Right. You know, I've never been in combat. I've interviewed dozens and dozens of people who have, but what goes through this little farm boy's mind when somebody's trying to kill you?
What the hell is going on?
Yeah.
That's what I said.
Yeah.
You know, I said, you know, I don't know. You know, I'm saying that, but oh my gosh, it's scared to death.
Right.
You know,
Right.
because you know, when we landed in Vietnam, of course, when we got on the pad as we getting off the plane, they were loading bodies up
Right.
on the other side. So this goes through your mind wicked all the time.
Right. But when you're young, do you think it's going to be somebody else and not you?
Yeah, you're kind of like, you think you're, you know, unstoppable, and you know.
Right. Now a lot of you folks who went there came back with malaria. Did you manage to come home without malaria?
No, I did not get that. No.
Right. Yeah, I run into quite a number of you who did. The other thing everybody talks about is foot rot.
Oh my goodness. I bet you it took almost 15 years to really get rid of it. My wife couldn't stand it when I took my socks off, you know. And now they're fine, but it took a long time.
Right. What was the interaction like with the Vietnamese people during especially when you were on patrol?
They were always out to get something from you, you know, trying to sell you something that, you know, trying to sell you pot or whatever they had.
Right.
But, you know, after about 6 months I was over there, I went into headquarters one day, and Major Cox, which was Captain Cox, asked me if I had a license, and I told him yes I do. And he said, "You want to drive Jeep?"
Yeah.
So I got both sides of the Vietnamese, and inside the wire they were very friendly, but at night they would shoot at you.
Right.
So I didn't trust them.
Right.
Put it that way. We didn't. I mean, I didn't.
Right.
Slept with one eye open.
Yeah, I think another fellow local Vietnam combat veteran, Winston Carbonneau,
Yes.
told me a very similar thing. The person cut the Vietnamese cutting your hair during the day was trying to cut your throat at night.
Yes. Yes.
So it was while you were driving Jeep that you became a decorated
Yes.
veteran. Now, what happened? What was it? The bronze?
Yeah, we were the medal with the V. We were over. It was doing textile fence, and they were inside the wire. And Major Cott called to me to bring him to headquarters. So we heading down the road, and we got shot at inside the wire.
Right.
So I jumped out one side, he jumped out the other, and grabbed my M16. So I didn't have nothing. And he finally gave it back to me after he got his 45 out. But anyways, they were inside the wire, and we were shooting at each other.
Right.
It was quite a thing. It was very bad, awful.
And like a lot of people who become decorated heroes, I think you kind of wondered why.
Yeah, I said, why did I get this? I mean, just did my job, I didn't think I did anything out of the ordinary,
And a lot of people who've been in those situations will say the secret is you are also trying to save your butt.
Yeah, exactly.
Because that's what a lot of people who've been decorated have told me.
Yeah.
You're trying to save your guys, but you're also trying to save your butt.
Yeah.
And a lot of times, almost every veteran have told me of every war that I've interviewed is when you are in combat, usually you're not sitting there thinking, "Oh, I'm doing this for my country." A lot of times you're doing this. All right,
I'm gonna get my butt out of here,
and you're going to try to bring as many of your friends as you can, through it. So, how long were you a Jeep driver versus on patrol?
I was I think on patrol about maybe 6 or 7 months. It's and that's when I extended my tour for 3 more months, because they gave you the option if you extended your tour, and when you had less than 150 days left in the service, they let you out.
Right.
Early extension. The Jeep was all right, but we got shot at a lot.
And when you say, just for the listeners, when you talk about inside the fence, that's supposed to be relatively
the safe part.
The safe spot. Yeah. But so it seems to me like that was a bit like what they were experiencing, particularly in Iraq. You'd have like the green zone in that, which is supposed to be safe, but then they would infiltrate it. So
because they used to rocket us every night. They were, the artillery would come in.
So decades. So when you were there, when you were fighting, when you were being shot at, did you have any sense of the war? How it was going? Did your beliefs change or anything?
No, not really. We just thought we were just doing our job. We wanted just getting our year in and get back on that plane and head back home. And I see a lot of, read up a lot about it in the last 2-3 years about documentary they've been having, and some of the stuff they were saying, I can't ever remember seeing that or hearing of it, but a baby was there, but we were focused more on keeping that butt safe and getting home.
Right. Did you go to the movie The Post?
No, I didn't.
The Post, I'm going to tell you, I wouldn't tell you to go to it because it depends on how, but since you're reading on documentaries, it was, I know John went to it, and for a career military veteran, I think it really was a bit eye-opening. The Post was the Washington Post released all kinds of military Pentagon secrets, and basically that the the leaders of the country at the time knew they were not even going to be able to win the war, and they allowed thousands and thousands of people to die just to save face. Since you're in the documentaries, that movie, The Post, you might want to watch. I've known several Vietnam veterans who are trying to make sense of the war, and we've actually watched that. So decades later, what do you think of that war?
Well, when I went to Washington, I see all those names on the wall. I didn't think very much of it, I think it was a loss, there's a few people on there I was with it when they died, and I just shake my head. I said, after listening to all these documents and stuff, I said it was a waste of time. It was a war of politicians, I call it.
But I think we've talked about this. I have a special place for Vietnam veterans because that we've talked quite extensively about it. Is when I was just a kid. Do you know the only thing I remember about the war, and I think I remember, since I was so young, I remember troops getting off the airplane, and I believe it was the release of the POWs that I was watching at the end of the war, at the very end. But in later years, in recording history, I have found that in interviewing people, you folks got the shaft.
Yeah.
No matter how you looked at it, your country, but then the people, tell about how you realized that. I think it was, I'm not sure which one it was, if it was you or somebody else told me when they returned home from war, one war had ended and another one had begun, as in.
Yeah, I just remember when we got to California, it was, I don't know what those hippies were all talking about, but the people were very, very against us, what we did, and everywhere you went, they just, I didn't feel comfortable. You get on the plane, they would take you off the plane because we were standby, and it just, I couldn't wait to get home and just throw my uniform in the closet and forget about it.
Yeah, because didn't you even, I believe you once told me that on an airplane you even got bumped by some,
yes,
just
I did.
some hippie that.
Yep, yep. The one that was demonstrating against the war, and they told me I had to get off the plane. I said I wasn't, and they dragged me, threw me down the chute,
Right.
and I don't know. Anyways, the next morning when I got on the plane, that night they told me I had to buy a first-class ticket to be able to get home.
Right.
So I did. And the next morning there was maybe 20 people on the plane.
Right.
And it was things like that
Right.
happened all the time.
Right. And you couldn't wear your. A lot of the returning troops were they told me that they were told make sure you take off your uniform.
I read that, and somebody said that, and they never ever told us that. It would have been nice if they'd told us that.
Right.
We wouldn't have worn our uniform. But you know what, Scott? I was very proud what I did.
Right.
I'm proud that I'm a Vietnam vet. I'm proud of it. I don't care what people thought. They wanted to spit on me. I was proud what I did, and I was proud to do it with all my brothers that I was there with. It's just, we talk about it a lot at the reunion, and we all have a little joke, about it. Who got spit at the most?
Right. Yeah, because you know what? Even revisionists will, because even revisionists will say, well, there really wasn't that. Spitting was only symbolic. That really didn't happen that much. Did it happen a lot?
Yeah, it did. I never got to, they never spit in my face, but you could, just the way they were talking. I happened to be at the airport when it was all happening, and I wasn't in that area, but you could see it.
Right.
It didn't actually happen to me, but I got called names and stuff.
Right.
And you just learn to shut stuff out like that, just like you do in a war zone.
Right.
You shut it out.
No, so So you came home, you went about life. What did you do for a living?
I went on the farm.
Right, right. And what I found interesting, because I knew you, but I didn't know you too well. I think my boys had you for a basketball coach, but it wasn't until maybe 10, 12 years ago when our family hosted a Vietnam veteran welcome home celebration for you folks.
Yep.
And was I think you actually shocked a lot of people who did not know you back then. They had never even known.
No.
They knew you as Mr. Basketball, the head of the border, well, now former head of border hoop. They didn't know you as this person who had served in Vietnam and had even gone into tunnels, who had been shot at. And how come you decided then to come forward and stand right in front of my group out of nowhere?
It just, I think after they released all those spies, I call them. Remember when they released all those spies that they captured? And then, I don't know, I was just driving by that day, and I knew you were there at the Outs, and I said, you know what about us?
Right.
And I don't know, I was with a friend, and he said, what are you doing? I said, well, I'm going to stop. And he said, why? He didn't really know he kind of knew I was in the Army, but he never knew the whole story. Because nobody wanted to hear about it. Nobody wanted to talk to you about it.
Yeah, and I think since we've held that, I now have had Vietnam veterans come out of the woodwork, and people tell other Vietnam veterans that it started a dialogue.
Yes.
And so because whether it be Cabby, as in Winston, John Wilson. And then there's one fella here. He lives in Newport. He lost both his legs in Vietnam. So I think it started a dialogue. And here's another. This is what I understand is you couldn't even get into VFW originally because you hadn't fought in a war.
Right. Yeah.
Now, was it you who tried to sign up and you couldn't?
Yeah. I just went in one day just to see what it was about, and they just called us baby killers, and we wasn't in a war, and it just, and of course it happened the same thing in White River when I went in to try to get in for my hearing and stuff, and it was the same thing there. They said, well, you should have been wearing earplugs, or some smart-ass remark, and
because that's one thing a lot of people don't realize is, although I loved, I've recorded dozens and dozens of the stories of World War II veterans, but some of them have even acknowledged to me in later years, and a lot of them are past now, that they didn't, even the World War II veterans did not necessarily treat you guys very well.
Yep. It really, and what goes on today, it really, really bothers me, because when you talk to kids on my bus, I'll ask them, I said, does anybody know what Veterans Day is? Day off. Memorial Day, day off.
Yeah.
But with me on the bus driving, I explain to them and tell them what veterans about, and I tell them to always stand for the flag. That's getting to be a real thing that really ticked me off when that football started not standing for the flag. When you have your friend get shot in front of you and you lose them, and then they don't want to stand for the flag.
Right.
That's very so.
I was actually stunned. I was a guest speaker for 7th and 8th grade. I won't say what school, but I was actually, I happen to think there's a lot of brilliant kids. I'm not one of these people who don't think kids that we're, I think in many ways, but I was even amazed by the lack of knowledge that some of the teachers had in history. I was like, really? It's like, now I understand why there's a growing number of kids who never even heard of the Holocaust.
Yes, yes.
Granted, I'm sympathetic to the teachers to a degree, because they have to teach so much stuff that really, in their ideal world, don't even belong
Yeah.
in schools. So maybe they can't get to everything. But yeah, I was a bit stunned how even some of the teachers had really no concept on the history.
I know I went to here in Newport City where John Wilson set up for veterans to go in and talk
Yeah.
to the kids. And I think that was such a great idea. You know, some of the kids, you know, the questions they asked, it was great. And I wish all the schools would do that because I think that's one way to get it into the schools and for the kids to understand what the country was about.
You know, North Country did that for years, and
Yes, they did.
the reason I know it is I ended up being the one they would contact. Usually Gary Johnson would contact me. There's a couple Gary Johnson from Irisburg, the
Yes,
teacher.
yeah.
He would contact me.
I
and,
went there once.
Yeah, and so in some, a couple times we even had a guy that I know who was a ski patroller with the German military. He even went and spoke a couple times what it was like to be the enemy.
Yeah.
And slowly, the World War II crowd, they just started dying off, and then you folks started coming. Now, fast forward, Gary's now retired, and now John has taken over, trying to bring people in. And as John will tell you, there's more than once I have, on moment's notice, when I've needed a speaker for something. Hey, John, can you do this? One time we were doing a Pearl Harbor event at the Bel Air nursing home, and he knew he was coming, but he didn't know, and I didn't know until about until he walked through the door that he had suddenly become the guest speaker. So,
Have you, I imagine you've been to the wall and
Oh,
you've
yeah.
been to the memorial. When we went, a friend of mine and we just headed down one day, just jumped in the car and we headed down. And the wall was unbelievable. But the thing that really got me the most, the wall was, like I say, I can't explain what it did to me. But when I walked over to the Korean memorial, it was so real because I was a grunt and I can see my drill sergeant going like this to get down, and my sergeant, and with the fog coming up. And I advise anybody to get a chance to just go see it. It's so.
I have been down several times, including with my now departed best friend Joe Queenan on an honor flight. And I know they're now bringing Korean and Vietnam veterans on these honor flights where the Patriot Guard escorts you. But a lot of the Patriot Guard's interesting is there's a fair number of those people who are Vietnam War veterans.
Really?
The Patriot Guard, because they don't want anybody of any war to be treated the way you guys were and the way they were treated. And so they go the extra mile. Even though you've been to the wall, if you ever have a chance to go as a guest of honor of these flights, they're free to the veteran. It's well worth the experience. Joe was just he was blown away by by the experience. So so you went many years, and then all of a sudden, when we hosted that event, you just came right out of your shell. You're going into schools. You've been on my radio show, but you also started doing something else, reunions.
Yes.
Now how come you? So you hadn't been for years.
No, some of the guys been going. We said this last one we just went to. Some have been going for 18 years.
Right.
But it's a whole platoon. I maybe served with you, but I didn't serve with the other guys. So we were just, and so they just kept calling me 2 years in a row, and finally I said yes, I'll go. And Scott, I wish I would have gone 3 years or 4 years early, because it really closed a lot of things that a lot of things that I thought I was dreaming, and it was real. And it just brought out a lot of stuff. I mean, even today, we just met there the other day. We get going about, and you remember that time we going down on that ambush? Oh, I don't remember that. And then somebody starts talking pretty quick. Yeah, you were the one. Yes, and I mean, every time as you get older, you forget stuff, but when somebody starts talking, it brings it back. And it's one of the best things, I don't know, I get to see, like I say, the guy that built my house, Kermit, get to see him because he owns a casino, and he's well off, and he's doing good, and he enjoys coming down and seeing us, and we have a good time. A good time.
So it's good therapy too.
Yes, it is. Very good. I mean, everyone gets a chance to pick on Shorty. I'm smallest guy there, and they always, and we have a good time. It's just...
Right. Do you think if you hadn't seen that sign that day for the Elks, and you hadn't seen, because there was a sign out there.
Yeah.
What do you think? Do you think you would have gotten to this place eventually, or?
Maybe because... because when Red called me, I mean, this was quite a few years, later, but I don't know if maybe I would have just opened up down there and not here. I don't know. They always say there's always a reason something happens.
Right.
And you know what? When I walked out there that day, it just like something heavy lifted off. It was kind of weird.
Right. Do you, we've watched now, I believe we've been at war now 18 years in Afghanistan, longer than Vietnam now. But the protesters, it seems like the protesters of it seems like the protesters of today actually learned some positive things from the experience, from the Vietnam War protesters. Is don't protest like that. There's ways to because today's protesters don't seem to attack the troops.
No, they don't.
You might disagree with them. They might disagree with you, but it seems like they learned how not to protest. Do you think that's true?
Yeah, I really do, because I hear anybody ever say anything bad about any soldier, and it gets me right out of my shoes. I said, I mean, you got to sit there and you got to support them. And support is so important when you're supported.
Right. You could, and it sounds like the returning troops, unlike, with you folks, from what I understand, you were basically, one day you're in the war zone, then you get on the airplane, and then a couple days later
you're on the streets.
Yeah, and you're at it on your own. You were, whereas like today's veterans, they seem to have a better support system. Wouldn't you say that's true?
But they still go from the zone to the street. I got my grandson's friend he was in Iraq, and he saw a couple of his friends, killed, and he had one of those looks that I remember, the dead look. Yeah. And I told him, I said, get help. You could see he wasn't, right. But he went from there, flew to wherever he was, Fort Bend, then he flew home.
Oh, really?
So they didn't sit there and say, do you need counseling?
Right.
And I think that's what Uncle Stan is still messing up big time.
The other thing I've been told by different veterans throughout the years, especially, a lot of times, World War II veterans, particularly that, and the Korean War veterans, even though, like the World War II veterans, they came home as heroes, treated like heroes, but a lot of them suffered silently. And
yes, they did.
Because there used to be a belief, and I know this went into Vietnam too. Don't talk about your feelings.
Yeah.
Don't talk about it because it will
Yeah.
bother you.
Yeah.
And so a lot of people turn to the bottle instead. But now I think now the general belief is talk
Yeah.
about it.
Yeah.
And if that's what you want to do, find somebody to talk
Yeah.
about. Because a lot of times, from what I understand, a lot of these people wanted to talk about it, but the people around them, whether it be their girlfriends or wives or parents, oh no, don't talk
Yeah,
about
don't
it. It'll
want to hear
bother
about
you.
it. Yeah.
And did you find any of that at all?
Yeah, what, it's funny, when I got home, nobody asked me anything about it.
Right.
I disappeared in the May. Then I came back in December '69 and appeared on the street again. Hey, how'd it go?
Yeah.
How was it going? And that's about it. Didn't ask me anything, but really I didn't want to tell them anything because.
Right, and that's it. Is I think sometimes people don't because they don't know what to say.
Right. Since they heard we were people killer, baby killers, maybe we have a gun in our back pocket, shoot them. I don't know what the reason was, but even my best friends, didn't ask me, how did it go over there?
Right.
They never asked me.
Right. One young woman who was in combat, in Nicole Conley, I believe, from Barton, Orleans. She was on the show, and she actually came on once with John Wilson, and she was in combat in Baghdad. And she said, it's funny, she says, well, technically, I guess they tell me I weren't in combat because she was an MP. She said, but boy, when we're kicking in the doors and people were shooting at us,
Yep.
I sure felt like I was in
Yep.
And it was a technicality thing. And but she was saying to me though that combat when you go to war and then you come home, your world experience is so much different than your friends that when they're worrying about these little things, because she's an amazing woman too. She's been on the show talking about PTSD and that, and she said no matter what, it changes you. Do you think that's true to some degree?
Oh, yes, it is. It is. You see the world a little different. I mean, when I got drafted, I was wild and stuff. And it kind of calmed me down quite a bit. I mean, I saw you took each day a little closer than you did before.
Right. Now, let's move on to, here's another thing. About Vietnam veterans, I've really started to develop this thought, and maybe it's not only Vietnam veterans, maybe it's all veterans, but I know a lot of Vietnam veterans who do a lot of good for their communities. Mm-hmm. And one thing I was looking through some photos, including this one of you playing Santa on your school bus. Well, you know what instantly that reminded me of is, again, back to Winston Carbonneau. He played Santa for, 20 years or so, and his experience with Santa, the reason he became Santa was because of Vietnam. One time they were out in the bush and they were told there's a dignitary coming in to visit, and we thought it was a member of the brass. And he says, then all of a sudden here comes this Huey with Santa Claus, he says, and guarded by elves with machine guns. And he came down, and so once he got out of the war, that sparked an interest in him. He wasn't, by day he was a police officer. By night, during the Christmas season, he became Santa Claus. So I saw that and I thought, no, you are a man who've done a lot for your community.
Yeah,
do you think at least part of it has anything to do with your service?
I think it does, because kind of see how some of the people over there, how they live.
Right.
And they grasped onto anything they could to be part of it. And yeah, I think it did. It just, I don't know why. It just, I like doing for people. I mean, and it just, I like doing it,
Right. So,
especially Christmas.
So how many years have you been a bus driver?
I think this makes my 11th year this year.
Now, to me, this is my view because I have total respect for bus drivers, but must be the nerves of steel that you had when you were going through the tunnels prepared you a little bit for the nerves of steel you must have to have.
Well, you know, I had somebody that your wife knew, Mr. Barrett, Lee Barrett, from Brownington, was my bus driver.
Yeah.
And I just remember that man. He had one leg,
Yeah.
and he used to change the tire on the side of the road when we had a flat.
Yeah.
And always had a good time on the bus,
Yeah.
always. And I always said, if I ever drive bus, kids are kids.
Yeah.
Kids are kids. You know, that's how I look at it. I was a kid once. I maybe wasn't the best kid, too, on the bus.
Right.
So I kind of overlook a lot of stuff, but I like the kids to, you know, to have fun.
Right. So how many years have you been playing Santa on the bus?
I just did it that 1 year as a driver. After that, I do it for the preschool,
Right.
you know, get on the preschool. Because the kids, you know, they start saying, are you really Santa or are you Gene? You know, I said, well, you got to believe. And some of them didn't know for sure. And I didn't do it after that. I just did it on preschool. Because you got the sixth graders, you know, saying he's not Santa. You know, it ruins it for the younger kids.
Right. Now, I've mentioned it throughout the show, or at least a couple times, is a lot of people think of you as the basketball guy. What year did you found the Border Hoop?
Yeah. Me and Pat Little.
How did that all come about?
It's just that we were in the Newport lead, and you know, we just saw different ways of having teams and different ways of teaching kids.
Right.
So we just parted our ways, and we just started Border Hoop League.
How many years were you with it?
25.
25 years. Good years?
Yes. I think my last year was the worst year because everybody knew I was getting done, and you know, they were pushing the buck a little bit, you know, on the referees, and you know, and I always said I always wanted to build a gym while I was in there, and have a glass wall. When the parents get out of line, we hit a button, the glass wall would come down, and we wouldn't be able to hear them, and we would have a lot of fun.
I had one of my sons is his father-in-law was a coach for years, and he just finally had enough, and it wasn't because of the kids.
Yeah.
It was because of the parents and the politics and the baggage they brought, trying to make up for their sports shortcomings by going through their by trying to make their kids into something maybe they didn't even want to be.
When I was running the program, when coach would come in to want to coach, and I always used to ask them, why do you want to coach? And if they said, because I want my kid more playing time, it kind of put a black flag up for me. And I used to always tell the coaches, I said, this one thing, you are a role model to these kids. A lot of them don't have a parent. Some of them don't have a father figure. Mm-hmm. And I said, you are a figure, and whatever you do, they're going to look up to. So be on your best behavior.
Right.
I didn't say be on your best behavior, but show a good role model.
Right.
You know?
One of the best coaches my son's ever had, and I don't think he was a trained coach, he loved the sport of soccer, is your cousin, Roy Wright.
Yes.
Roy was an amazing coach, soccer coach.
Yeah.
Maybe he wasn't as well versed as maybe some other coaches around the state.
Yeah.
But he knew how to treat those kids, and he created a winning team. Not because he knew every strategy, but because
each kid had confidence
right.
in what they were doing.
Right, and he was an outstanding.
Yeah, I was told that.
Yeah, he was out. Yeah, he was just simply outstanding. Here's a photo of a group from 1985 and 86. And what I found interesting is this. You've worked with several hundred kids throughout the years. Before the show, you looked at that photo and you were able to name off every kid. And, these are kids who are now adults. These kids are now parents themselves, most of them are. But you were able to tell me every single kid. Can you do, if you were given photos of the kids, of the different kids you had throughout the year, and their basketball photos, would you be able to tell most of them?
Yeah, the ones that sticks in my mind a lot is when I blew the whistle a lot on them, Yeah. Certain kids used to, had reflections on you, kids that used to volunteer to help. That was one good thing about the program that I ran. I had a lot of good volunteers. Right. The kids were good, but I remembered kids mostly by their numbers.
Right. Now, I think he would have been too old to have been in your league. A basketball player who went on to the big time, Steve Clifford. He probably would have been.
No,
Steve. No. Steve Clifford was a local boy, but he would have predated you because he graduated from North Country, I believe, 1979, and now he's the head coach of the Orlando Magic. Did you have any kids that went on to college sports or anything?
Not that I know of. We had one kid that played in a tournament, Coppin Rap.
Oh.
He played in that tournament when they used to come down from the town he was from.
Was he Danville?
No, not Danville.
Okay. But they just retired his number down at UVM.
That. And I remember him like yesterday, when he played, because his dad was a real nice man. You kind of remember people like that,
Yeah, actually, I served with his father in the in legislature. He was a really nice man. Yeah. Then there was a fella down at UCA who he went on to have a fairly distinguished career in basketball, but I can't remember his name right offhand.
I know the feeling.
But the thing is even though you may have not had any NBA stars coming out, I bet you created a lot of memories for kids.
Yes, I get a lot of kids. Even today, I'm friends with them on Facebook, And they always send me a thing. Hey, you still doing border hoop? And I say, no, I'm not. And they tell me a lot of them tell me how a good time they had. I see them on the streets all the time, and a lot of them had a lot of good memories, and that was my thing, because a lot of these kids would never, ever play the NBA,
right.
And just wanted a good memory of something.
That's where some parents ruin it, though.
Yeah, but, you look at it, all it needed is one or two,
No, I know, yeah.
And a lot of them just, they thought they would pay their money to sign them up and say, there, I'm good. But they just didn't know that half what went behind it. Right. And like I say, I had so many good volunteers and that helped me, and they all retired with me at the same time. And I just wish that Mike Stanley is doing the NEK, and I just wish parents would just step up and help him, because he's doing a good job, but he needs people to help him. Right. Not sit there and run it down. Help him.
Right. Now, you're also. I also noticed you on social media. You're also a man of. You're also a very talented man when it comes to making things out of wood. And if I recall correctly, I don't know if we bought it from you, through you. We have a picnic table that
I delivered it to you.
Okay, I couldn't remember if we bought it directly from you or if it's through a... Yeah. So, okay.
You were up to one of my friends that used to hang out there, the Bakers.
Yeah, okay,
Baker House.
And, we still have it, but you make... you
give me a picture, I'll make it.
Yep. And so you have your shop, and you... I know you like to. It seems like you like to experiment making different things.
Yes, I do. It's a challenge.
Right.
And and my especially when I don't drive bus during the summer, I get in there at 7 in the morning, go to 5 at night and get lost in it. And
Right. What is your business called?
Gene's Custom Furniture.
Yeah. No, I've seen many of your. I think you have something that does it collapse into a table?
Yeah, the convertible table.
Yeah, I've seen you post.
Yeah. Somebody sent it to me on Facebook and said, "Can you make this?" So I just blew up the pictures, and I kind of like figured out how it would be, and it took me a while to get it, and it's a lot of time involved in it, but it's fun to make.
I think this is my theory about that kind of stuff. Is you have to be born with that kind of mindset.
My dad did it, so
yeah. Because I have no, I have no talent when it comes to stuff like that. But on the other hand, is I know at least 2 of my kids. I expect. Well, one of my sons is. We have no idea where he got it from, except for maybe because he, even though he was going towards college, he did take career center classes as well, and he's like a master carpenter just on the side, and I expect his twin brother is the same way. He just doesn't know it yet. And our daughter, she can do anything with her hands, and meanwhile, Dad, it's just like, okay.
It must have came from your wife's side.
It probably
came
did.
from the Curtises.
Well, I actually suspect it did because one of her brothers, Bogue.
Yeah.
I didn't know he was like a master. He was a logger,
Yeah.
But when he built his beautiful house, he had it framed. But then he did all the intricate work that he really wasn't trained to do. But that family, I'm going to tell you, maybe because the reason they were such good deer hunters, they have an eye.
Yeah.
They have an eye for detail.
Oh, yeah.
Scotty, on the other hand, I have no eye for that. So, it was great having you on because I think you are one of the unsung heroes of the area. And as I said, I think Vietnam veterans really have gotten a bad rap, and I find a lot of you folks really. I think if you looked at the percentage, you serve your communities. You serve your communities more than the average person. You know, whether it be Winston Carbonneau, who served his community as, well, he served in Vietnam, or he served in Korea, but when he got out, he served on the Newport Police Department, then the Sheriff's Department. He served as Santa Claus. Then you take John Wilson, career military man, immediately got out, he's probably, without a doubt, probably the best leader Newport has ever seen, as a former city councilman. And then even the fellow I was telling you about who lost both his legs in Vietnam, I suspect he still does it, is when his father was in a nursing home, he would go there to the nursing home and help all around there because he has limited he can do. And after his father died, he continued to go to the nursing home and help out.
That's great.
So I'm thinking the percentage-wise, from what I could see, Vietnam veterans really step up to the plate.
Oh, just like what I had on my shirt here.
We were the best America had. Well, that's true, and that's what
brothers fought with side by side without America's support.
Right, and that's what my buddy Joe Queenan used to say. He always hated when Vietnam veterans would come up to him and, well, you won the war. And he said, hey, listen, because Joe was very good to Vietnam veterans.
Yeah, he was.
He was very good to Vietnam veterans. Because not all World War II veterans were.
But Joe was he was a different type of man.
Yeah, and so he always hated Vietnam veterans dishing themselves because he knew you guys had served and you fought a good war. Well, you fought the good fight. You fought against the odds in so many ways.
But when I think of World War II veteran and when they hit the beaches there, what those young men were thinking of, when they dropped the gates.
Oh yeah.
You know?
Well, one time on this show, I had. Let me get this right. I had a panel, and one of them was Lindy Palin, who passed away in the last couple of years. He was a B-17 bomber pilot. Then we had, John Wilson representing Vietnam, and then Dana LaPlante recognizing the current veterans. And it was so interesting to listen to them talk, and they compared and contrasted. It's like what war was like for them. It's like, for Lindy and John, messages from home came in letter form. Today's, you get on the email or you take a cell phone for Dana, and they had it was really interesting listening to them talk about each other's, war experiences throughout the generations.
You take one thing I'd like to say is that I don't care what you did when you were in the war, you did your job. I don't care if you were a combat soldier or you were a cook or you were a Jeep driver or you were in the office, you were always in harm's way, no matter where you were. Everyone, the war wouldn't have moved on with any of these guys. So,
well, you know what? John Wilson was very honest about it. He said, when I was a combat soldier, at that time, he said, you had a little swagger to you when you come back. But then he said, after he became a leader himself, because he went on to serve in, career military man, he realized, hey, maybe we were up there fighting. That's true. But we could not have been fighting without all these people behind us. And he said, I gained.
Somebody had to move the paperwork.
Yeah, and he said, I gained a real appreciation for what went on behind the scenes.
Yep.
So, well, I want to end it by thanking you for your, not only your service in Vietnam, but your service to your community. You're an outstanding person. I think our region is fortunate to have you, and keep up the good work.
Yeah. Thank you for having me, Scott.
And we'll have to have you back on another time, and maybe get you back on another panel, and. We'll have another panel of Vietnam veterans.
Yeah, make sure I come over and see my Christmas lights. They'll be going up pretty quick.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's right. Do you compete with Marcia Dishino?
Oh, yeah. Oh, my gosh. Her and I, we go back and forth on that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I'm probably the only house that seldom ever has a Christmas light. Not because I don't believe in them. I never have time.
I plan to have 6,500 lights.
You know what? We'll drop up by this year. Okay. All right. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you. Yeah.
And thank you to the viewers for tuning in to another segment of the Northeast Kingdom Voice.